I had a terrible time with my bunkie. She was trying to intimidate me, and she grabbed my hair and twirled it around her finger. And I was like, I need to hit her now. I hit her, but we were in seg, we were in the shoe. So she was just as shocked as I was. And I go back to my bunk and I sit on it and I pretend like I'm reading the only book in our cell. And she goes and slams on the door and she starts screaming, "Let me out of here, get me out of here."
Mary Valdovinos grew up in Connecticut with a supportive family and a Yale acceptance. Then a spiral starting junior year derailed everything. After high school, addiction pulled her into dealer's orbit. She became a drug runner, was arrested by the DEA for conspiracy to distribute, violated probation after a second chance, and landed herself in federal prison. Now, Mary's rebuilt her life and uses her story to mentor and empower justice-impacted women. Mary, welcome to Locked In. Thanks so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me, Ian. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing this for a while. I'm glad we can make it happen. You're right down the road in Norwalk.
Yeah, I've actually lived there for over 20 years now, so this was a 20-minute drive, yeah.
Yeah, it's not bad at all, and right to Stamford, too.
Yes.
Which is the mini kind of New York City type thing for Connecticut.
Norwalk is becoming like that, too. It's getting crazy. It used to take me 5 minutes to get across town, and it takes me maybe 30 now.
They made it really nice, though, in South Norwalk. I like going there to eat, or the mall there.
For sure, but way too many people. Way too much traffic.
Yeah, it's definitely nicer than Danbury, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just with the nightlife and everything.
Yes, they do have a nice nightlife scene.
So we met through the child mentorship program that we were doing in Connecticut, and it's so funny when people introduce me to people. They're like, "Oh, they went to prison too. You got to have them on the show."
Great.
I wonder how people actually feel about being introduced like that to someone.
For me, I don't mind anymore. I've learned to be an open book, and I always say, if you don't own it, it will own you.
Yeah. I mean, that's very powerful, and that's what the whole point of the show is about.
Yeah.
So you were born in Norwalk, too?
I was born in Stamford. I grew up there until I was 10 years old. My family moved to Norwalk. Both of my parents were immigrants. My mom came over for school. My dad came over for work. And I had a really good upbringing. I have one younger sister, and we're really close now, but it wasn't always the case. Getting in trouble and all of that, that was my own doing. It had nothing to do with the way I was brought up. And my parents definitely gave us every opportunity that they could afford to us. So I was very blessed.
What was the age difference between you and your sister?
It's about 2 years, a little over a year and a half. So we were very close when we were younger, drifted apart a little because of my own choices. And, over time, people say trust takes time to rebuild, right? And you'll prove it to them. And when I stopped trying to prove it to them and just started to prove it to myself, that's when things started to improve between us.
What were your parents doing for work while you were growing up?
So my dad used to own a stonemasonry company growing up, and he basically, paid the bills, took care of our family. My mom didn't go back to work until I was about in third grade, and my sister was in first grade, and she was a social worker. So similar work to what I do now, because I do the same thing. I'm in human services.
Were you guys a close-knit family?
Very, very.
What were some of the values they instilled in you as a kid growing up?
Oh, honesty, motivation, hard work, absolutely. Education was huge, and just being a good person. Everything my parents did, even though my dad had his own small company, he was very generous to people around him, even more so than my mom, who was a social worker, and in different ways, right? But everything we did was to put good back out into the world and into our family.
Do you think you understood those traits as a child, or do you think it took years of growing older and what you went through to figure that out?
It definitely took years to figure it out. In retrospect now, it's something that I value because I grew up with and it was instilled in me, right? So even as an adult making some poor choices, those values and morals were still there. They were lingering. And no matter what I did my best to be a good person.
How would you have described yourself as a kid or as a young teenager?
So, overachiever, a little bit of a child prodigy on the way. My mom had us involved in everything, and there was a little bit more pressure on me to succeed being the oldest sister. So from a young age, all my life I danced ballet. I played the violin. I played the piano. My true passion was the violin, though. That really took off for me, and I felt like it transported me to a different dimension in a way. I could authentically be myself, and I really focused in on that. I was a straight A student, really good. My mom taught us English and Spanish at the same time, so I'm fluent in both languages. And when we moved to the Norwalk school system, I have to say the Stanford school system had set us up for success, because I had my sixth grade teachers telling me that if I was to go into the eighth grade honor classes, I would still be ahead of everyone else. And, they had me like on the wall, which was super embarrassing because I was in a new school. I was shy. I was an introvert at the time. And my face was plastered on the hallway wall for a whole year, like high honor roll. This student hasn't dropped her grades. She keeps doing great. And my mom signed me up for Japanese when I was in sixth grade. So I'm like, okay, I'm new. I'm different. I have no friends, and I'm studying Japanese. Like, what am I going to do? So I definitely honed in on that, and it opened the doors for me. I was able to study abroad. I traveled to Japan. It was our first year as a school doing this student exchange program. And there was some pressure on our class. My teacher said, this trip is going to make or break whether this relationship continues. And she had us make a speech our last day there. Of course, she helped me translate the whole thing. Mrs. Goldenberg, she was a wonderful teacher, so sweet. She helped me translate mine, and I got a standing ovation. And everyone's like, oh, my God, you did so good. I'm like, thanks. I don't really know, what I said. I know what I said in English. But they credited me with opening the doors for that relationship to continue, and it still goes on now. So, I was very proud of myself. I felt accomplished. I struggled a little bit with friends. I was bullied pretty badly, maybe because I was an overachiever. At the time, there wasn't MySpace or Facebook or Instagram. So we had online blogs, and one of them was called Zanga. Have you ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, before your time, Ian, really?
How old are you now?
33.
Oh, you're only 3 years older than me.
Yeah, so you just dodged that bullet.
Yeah, when I was in school, it was MySpace. And AIM, AOL, all those.
Yes, so we had AIM too, but Zanga was an online blog, like a journaling platform, and a group of girls that I had become friendly with. They had targeted me, and they were bullying me really badly, basically telling me that I should kill myself, making up stories about me. I remember breaking my then desktop computer, and I was like, I'm done. And there was so much pressure for me to go back to school and do well that I kept going to school, obviously. I couldn't tell my mom more than one day that I didn't feel good, because she was the type, let me take your temperature. So yeah, that I just focused on my schoolwork and made a new group of friends, got into sports, kept playing the violin. I was still in dance. And once I got to high school, I started opening up more. I was, blossoming in a way, making new groups of friends. I played field hockey and lacrosse. I became a first violinist in the first month I was in school. Started playing with local symphonies and the Youth Philharmonic in Stanford, chamber orchestras, and I felt really in a good place.
What were you thinking of doing career-wise for your future at that point, if you had anything figured out?
Oof. I wanted to do something great. I really wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to fight the bad guys in court. But I also wanted to defend people that were wrongfully accused of things that they didn't do. So that defensive part of me was always there, the caring side. My mom says I grew up, very innocent, naive in a way. So I think that has stuck with me my whole life, and it's been a blessing and a curse.
What's one thing you wish you could change about high school, if you could go back in time and redo it?
I stopped caring as much when I got to my junior year. I killed the SATs. I killed the ACTs. I got into Yale my junior year of high school. Very small scholarship. And I just thought I had everything set for me, that I could start to slack off. So I did. I stopped playing sports. I started hanging out with a different crew. I started smoking weed, and I started selling weed, throwing house parties, and somehow I was getting away with all of it.
Why do you think you were getting away with it? I feel like your parents would have, become very strict on you very quickly if you go from that star student, probably a lot of pressure by the parents on you, to doing that.
Yes, and at the same time, they sort of thought I was set too. So they allowed it. And, we would hide the liquor like in the washing machine and the dryer when my parents would come down. The cops would show up sometimes. But eventually these parties got out of control, like people standing outside on the stone wall that my dad built with funnels, chugging beers, my neighbors calling the cops. I mean, it's a small suburban neighborhood in Norwalk. So things started to get a little out of hand, and I was like, okay, I've got to tone it down. But my parents were still, my mom was kind of a little bit of an enabler. She was like, oh, yeah, no, it's not your fault. It's theirs. Don't worry. Everything's okay. You just keep going to school, doing good. I remember my first police interaction was because of school. We were in midterms or finals or something, and I did not study. I pulled the fire alarm, and a couple of girls that I thought I was cool with saw me, and they told on me right away. The school resource officer called me down, and I just bullshitted my way out of it. I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, did you wear a glove? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And yes, I did wear a glove.
Because of the ink that shoots out
Yeah,
at you?
because people, I thought it out. I wasn't just, before I do something, I'll plan it out, I'll think it through, and I'm like, okay, this is stupid, but I'm going to do it anyway.
What do you think caused that unraveling junior year that, kind of caused you to lash out? Was there too much pressure on you and too many rules growing up by your parents, or what do you think it was?
There was certainly an expectation on me, but I started working at an early age, basically as soon as I could. I saved up for my car, so I was one of the only people in my class with a car. Just having that freedom, but I still followed through with my responsibilities and what was expected of me. I was also in a not so good relationship in high school. And that relationship exposed me to a slew of things that I shouldn't have been around, and I wouldn't have otherwise been if I wasn't in that relationship.
So what happens? Do you end up graduating high school and going to college, or what does the story look like?
By the skin of my teeth, Ian. I graduated high school. Senior prom was, wow, like a movie in itself. And that's kind of where my experimentation with hard drugs started. But I graduated, and I had no plans to go to college. I did not know what I was going to do. I figured, a couple of the schools that I applied for, the only schools I applied for, I basically got into. So I felt that I could go and do whatever I wanted. And ultimately, I thought, well, I have no plan, I guess I'll do community college. Norwalk Community College is right there in my town. And I didn't even pick up on that right away. My drug addiction took off.
How did your parents react to you getting into Yale and then picking community college to go to school?
I honestly don't even remember. I was getting away with everything. I somehow would manipulate the situation to make it look like, well, this is better for me. We can't afford that anyway. And my mom knew, early on, she was like, well, realistically, is this really where you want to go? Is this really what you want to do? And no, because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I was following this relationship, my friends, and just having fun. I had no direction. And I believe because, what you asked earlier, that expectation to excel, maybe that pressure had gotten to be too much for me. And I was just looking for a way to fit in wherever I could. And yeah, that's it.
Tell us about the drug addiction.
So I started experimenting with drugs pretty early on. Around 15, 16, I started smoking pot. I really liked it. And for not for everyone, it's a gateway drug, but for me it was, because I felt like I smoked so much weed. You know, one of my best friends had a 3.5-foot bong, and we were clearing that every day and kind of showing off with it. So I felt like I could do any drug that I wanted. I had been prescribed pills for sports injuries. I had my appendix out when I was like 14, and my mom did not fill the script. She did not want me to take any of that medicine, and now I know why. But at the time, you know, even if I did fill the script, I was giving those away to friends. I didn't realize the value that they held or the danger that they held as well. So come around senior prom time, me and my friends were experimenting with coke. You know, we had fun. It wasn't really my thing. A lot of my friends got into pills. That wasn't really my thing either. And late that summer, I want to say, a friend of my friends had introduced me to heroin. And at the time, she was like, it's just like a crushed pill. It's the same thing. It's just cleaner and purer, and it'll make you feel better. Also, she told me that my high school boyfriend had just cheated on me. So I'm like, my whole world is crashing down. I'm like this little girl. I had no direction. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was like, F it. You know, I tried it, and that was the beginning of a long downward spiral.
How do you think someone with good morals, raised by a good family, gets to that point where they're willing to try those things? What do you think clicks in the mind to do that? Even though you could be raised by an amazing family and have all the things in life, and you still kind of choose to do that?
Avoid. Something is missing inside you. You know, although I had this, you know, great life laid out for me, essentially, you would think, I had a close-knit family. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel valued. I didn't feel good enough. I remember I would come home and I'd be like, Mom, I got the highest grade in my class. You know, I beat everyone, this and that. And she would be like, yeah, okay. I'm like, what do you mean, okay? Well, that's expected of you. So I was like, oh, all right. So I'm chasing this success that almost didn't even matter to me. It was like a race to the finish line, and once I passed it, I'm still running, but towards what?
And I feel like that's a feeling a lot of people experience. Maybe it doesn't lead them to drugs, but it does lead them to other behavior, and we see that especially with social media. That demand and pressure it puts on people, comparing ourselves to others.
Oh, yeah.
And making decisions based on those feelings.
Absolutely.
So you start doing heroin, what happens?
Oh. It was a very rapid downhill trajectory from there. I started out using on the weekends. You know, I was hiding it. I was still working. I always kept a job. And it didn't take long before I was letting my friend shoot me up. And that was it for me. I mean, I remember the first time I tried heroin, it was a feeling that just, it felt like it was meant for me. It felt like it completed me. A euphoria that filled every positive sense that I had. More than that warm blanket feeling that they describe. It filled the holes, the void that was in me. And it just felt right. I mean, it felt like crap, actually. So I got really sick. I was throwing up, but that euphoria was still there. And a part of me thought, I need more of this. Like, I want to do it again. And I couldn't wait to keep doing more. So it didn't take but a couple of months before I was fully hooked.
How could something that gives you such bad side effects make you feel so good at the same time?
I can't explain it, and I hope you never find out. Honestly, it's you know that it's bad for you, but eventually those bad feelings wear off, and you just become dependent on it. It makes your mind, body, soul feel better, and it also hooks your mind, body, and soul.
By the time you're actually hooked and in full-blown addiction, are you still going to school? Are you living with your parents? What does that look like?
Well, my mom was pushing me to take a couple classes at the community college at least. So I did sign up for like some criminal justice classes. I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew I was committing crimes just by doing these drugs. And I was living at home. Pretty early on, my parents noticed, my mom especially, and she started to find things. She started to call me out on it. I'd blame it on a friend. Okay, get rid of that friend. But the drug lifestyle started to take over.
Do you think your parents were ill-equipped to handle your drug addiction?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was not privy to the fact that heroin even existed in my town. I had no idea where it came from. I didn't know anyone who used it, or so I thought. And my parents had no exposure to it. My dad was an alcoholic growing up. He drank beer every day, and he's a couple of years sober now. And that's just because it took a toll on his health, and that's more socially acceptable. But as far as drugs go, they were against the pot. They were against any hard drugs, and understandably so.
How is your sister reacting to this?
My sister hated me. She hated me. I might get emotional. And I felt really bad because I wanted to be a role model for her, and I couldn't be anymore.
Why do you think she didn't go down the same path you did?
Because she saw what it was doing to me. My sister was once the social butterfly, and then she started focusing on her schoolwork while I started becoming a social butterfly and partying. And she was embarrassed by it, I'm sure. I would be too if I was in her shoes.
So do you think that if she didn't have you to see how those experiences affected you, she could have very easily succumbed to that same path?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What happens next?
Oh, boy. So I started, first of all, I was connected to my friend's drug dealer. You know, at first, they kind of try to keep it from you because they want to maybe charge you more so you pay for their drugs and your own. She introduced me to him, and that was it. I had access to my own drugs. He started asking me if I would go make little deliveries for him, and I soon became a drug runner without even realizing it. I was being paid in drugs and a little bit of cash, and when they would go out to these nice fancy restaurants to eat, I would go along with them. So just for some clarity, this wasn't some street-level drug dealer. This was someone who was only selling to very wealthy Fairfield County people. He dressed like he was an entrepreneur. He was very charismatic. You would think that this guy was working on Wall Street somewhere, but all the while he was selling drugs to people, including myself.
And what kind of drugs were you selling and running for him? I know you were doing heroin, but what were the other drugs?
Everything. The majority of people would look for pills, for heroin. Coke was huge, but crack was bigger. And you would be surprised how many people in like mansions in Darien are spending hundreds of dollars a day on crack.
It doesn't really seem like, though, that a heroin addict like yourself would fit his mold for the business. If he's dressing up and he's running it like a professional business as an entrepreneur, why would he want you involved?
His exact words were, because I was a little girl, I didn't look like a heroin addict, and if the police pulled me over, they were very likely to let me go.
How much drugs were you moving for him?
Oof. In the beginning, not a lot. And I say in the beginning because he ended up being arrested. He had a bunch of other people running drugs for him. I mean, he had a wife. He had a girlfriend. He had a young couple that he put up in a place to sell out of their place for him. and it was run like a business. So I wasn't as involved then as I was years down the line when he came back home and started selling again, and we were reconnected.
So when he got arrested and went to prison, that stopped the operation?
Yeah.
And what happened to you when that happened?
Nothing.
So you didn't get in trouble, never got caught for that circumstance?
Not at all. No. And some people were able to fly under the radar. I mean, I was more like doing favors for him. It wasn't a regular thing, so I wasn't getting paid. I wasn't reaping the benefits of having a place to stay at the time. I still had a job, and I was a beginner drug addict. So, with a bag or two a day, I was content.
So what happens to you when he goes away?
I connected with another person who was a customer of his, and I didn't know where else to get drugs. And I was like, I can't hit the streets. I don't look like the type to be down in South Norwalk at the time. Well, now it's so beautiful and cleaned up and gentrified, but at the time it was, there were people selling drugs out on the street. And I knew the risk that I would take going out there, even asking for drugs. I could be killed, I could be kidnapped, whatever. So I connected with one of his other customers. He connected me with another drug dealer, and I had a car. So that's what they were really after. This girl's got a car. She uses drugs. We can take advantage of that and have her run drugs for us. So I basically did the same thing for him. He was a much lower level drug dealer, and he was known in the community for getting into trouble. So I knew it was only a matter of time. Again, I was only seeing a couple of people here and there, mostly just to sustain my own addiction. And after he got arrested, I was more exposed to the street life. I connected with a guy who was a customer of his. We started dating. We became using buddies. And we started shoplifting, boosting baby formula. That was a huge come up. And it sounds crazy, but we were making upwards $500 a day, just cleaning the store shelves of baby formula and selling it to the bodegas to be able to afford our drugs.
Yeah, I remember that was a big thing back in the day, to the point where they started locking up the baby formula too.
Yeah, I don't think it's as easy to boost it anymore.
So how much would the bodegas buy baby formula for?
Oof. So the big cans would go, if they sell them for about $22 or $20, they would give you half of that, so $10 or $11. And the smaller cans would go for about $8. And just think about it. We would come in with bags, and we were walking. I was probably like 85 pounds at the time, walking the streets of South Norwalk and Bridgeport because, of course, you've got to go up the line and start selling to new people. So that's how we were making our living, but we definitely had some bad days. There were times we would sleep under bridges, outside in parks. Our parents had had enough of us. They were just sick, and they wouldn't tolerate it in their house. So, and I don't blame them. I was a little too bold at the time, thinking that what I was doing was okay and acceptable, but it was very shameful. And, there were days we would scrounge up change just to have $1 to buy a donut to eat for the day. Yeah, that was really tough. And we knew that we were bad in our addiction, but we didn't really seek help. And in a way we did, because we were trying to get back on our feet, going to what they used to call the drop-in center in Norwalk. They would help you put a resume together or connect you with resources, but there was hardly anyone ever there. Sometimes they would close the door on us and kick us out. And it just felt like we weren't accepted anywhere. Eventually, here, the police interaction comes along. He had already done time in the system when he was a juvenile. And he, at one point, went to jail. I remember going to visit him every day at BCC, and that wasn't normal. I mean, I was like 19, 20 years old. Eventually, I got arrested by one store for shoplifting baby formula, and all of these other stores issued warrants for my arrest, and I was arrested 6 times in a matter of 3 months.
And how old were you at that point when you got arrested?
About 20 or 21.
And these were all felonies you were facing, or was it misdemeanors?
Misdemeanors, yeah.
And what was the outcome of those arrests?
Oof. So I had a really great public defender, and he was a nice guy. He was able to drop some of the charges. He was like, oh, these are still photos. That's irrelevant to me. I'm like, okay, go off. He combined all of those cases together into one and filed or applied for AR, Accelerated Rehabilitation, which is a condition of the court if you stay out of trouble for a certain amount of time. Typically, it's between 1 to 3 years. They will essentially drop all your charges. So it's like a probationary period. And they only gave me a year of AR for all those charges. And I remember the judge in the Norwalk court when it was still open, Judge Dennis, she turned and looked at me and said, if you get arrested one more time, I will raise your bond so high, your mom and daddy will not be able to bond you out. And I was like, okay. I failed the AR a few months before the year hit because of dirty urines. I couldn't stop getting high. I was really struggling with my addiction. And I did try. I tried going to the rooms. I didn't know anything about rehab, so that just seemed like a foreign concept to me. From what I had heard, celebrities go to rehab. How are we going to afford to go to rehab? We are from very lower middle class families, and it's not fair to place that on our families, right? This twisted form of thinking, because look at all the shame that we were putting on our families at the time. So I tried going into the rooms. I wasn't very successful there. It was very cliquey. I felt almost like that mean girl energy again, which I either, run away from or isolate from in a way. So without trying to get my boyfriend at the time to relapse and go down the path that I was going down, I started using on my own and maintaining that. So back to my cases, when I failed my AR, they didn't incarcerate me. They ended up giving me 3 years of probation for one of the larger cases and 4 years for another one. And that was the start of my probationary period. It kind of made me stay in line to an extent. I learned how to beat the urines. I learned, how much time I had to go between using to have a clean urine. And I had a very strict probation officer, but I think she was sick of me by the time she gave me early termination on both of them by like a year. And I had police interaction again, no new arrests, but she knew what was going on. She had police officers reach out to her and say, this girl was boosting baby formula. And somehow I'm like, me? What do you? And she was sick of me. She was like, get out of my office. She would tell, okay, bye. I'm still very polite, very respectful, trying to appear like I've got it together, but I don't. She saw me one time driving with a suspended license, and she called and left me a voicemail and said, if I see you driving with your suspended license again, you're going to jail. And I called her back. I was like, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, the day she gave me early termination, I remember going into her office for a regular check-in, and she said, these are your early termination papers. And I was like, oh, okay, great. I had no idea it was coming. I was certainly not qualified for it. I did not deserve it. But she put it in front of me. I signed the papers, and I asked, is this for both cases? And she was still looking down, and she looks up at me, and she's like, what are you still doing in my office? I was like, okay, thank you, bye. And I was out of there.
Do you think the system was too easy on you in those early years?
Absolutely. I felt, and this is something I haven't thought about in a long time, they were sending my then boyfriend to rehab. And I thought that was so cool because one time I remember going up to visit him and it was like a country club. It was this beautiful place. You're not using drugs. How do I sign up for this? And in a way, I feel like they failed me. But at the same time, yeah, absolutely, they went too easy on me. I don't know if them sending me to rehab or a program at the time would have saved me from my addiction, but letting me get away with all that was certainly not helping either. It just fueled it. And, addicts are manipulative and deceitful. And those are two words I was called a lot during that time. And understandably so. I was getting away with things. I should not have been let off probation easy. I should have gone to jail. I should have gone to a program. A lot of things.
What happens once you get off probation?
I was partying. I felt like I had less constraints on me, but I was always looking over my shoulder. And it didn't take long before I reconnected with my first drug dealer. He came home, and at this point, I'm still dating the same guy. We were more like using buddies and best friends more than anything, but we had each other's support, and each other's backs from what I felt. And, my parents, they knew, but they were in denial, and they were kind of enabling me too, because after me being out on the streets and being homeless for a little bit, they preferred for me to be home even though I was using versus being outside on the streets. And it's something that I understand because I see parents going through, but I will never fully understand because I'm not in that position, and I hope I never have to go through that.
Do you think you broke your parents' heart at the time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My dad definitely started looking at me differently, and my mom, it was a huge letdown for them. They had high hopes for me. Here I was as a young kid on this upward path. I had everything set out for me. How could I go wrong?
Were you thinking those thoughts at all back then? Were you ever thinking, wow, I got into Yale, or I had such a bright future, let me turn this around, or how did I get here? Or are those thoughts that don't normally come to someone until after they've gone through something like that and have seen the other side? Like, you don't think about it in the moment.
Yeah, I really wasn't thinking clearly at all in that moment. I thought that everything I was doing that was wrong, like committing crimes, was justifiable because I was an addict and I needed to get my fix. And as long as I wasn't hurting anyone, it was okay. Lo and behold, I reconnected with this first drug dealer around 2016 at this point, and it wasn't long before I was running drugs for him again. And this time it was off to the races. He reestablished himself, nice car. He had his little team set up. I somehow fell in there somewhere, but I was so low in this circle. It was about 5 of us that I felt like I wasn't even really part of the crew. I'm doing this on the side, mostly just to afford my drugs, to get my allowance, a little bit of cash. Sure, if I needed a new phone, they'd buy it for me. He bought me my first BlackBerry back when I was like 18 years old. And I felt like I fit in. And it kind of goes back to that seeking, fitting in, and feeling welcomed and all of that. So I was still working at the time, waitressing, whatever I could really do, but I maintained employment. And things were getting out of hand. Narcan became a thing. And even though it was around, it wasn't as readily accessible as it is now. But he had it all the time. So something in my head clicked like, this isn't okay if you have this ready to Narcan someone. He was mixing his own stuff. And though I wasn't fully privy to it, he would tell us, he was ordering things in from China, looking for the strongest fentanyl at the time. Now, this is the first time I ever heard the word fentanyl. And it's supposed to be stronger than heroin. It's supposed to be able to kill you. Be careful. So I wanted nothing to do with it because even though I was strung out, I didn't want to die. And I was afraid because I had close friends that used. I had my boyfriend was using. And I told him, no matter what he tells you, don't try the fentanyl. And sure enough, he did. And I'll never forget, like, saving him from an overdose at my parents' house and dragging him into the bathtub. I had no idea what to do. It was my first time dealing with it. I did not have Narcan. And he pulled through that, but it was scary.
Yeah, I remember reading the articles in 2016 or even 2017 about the fentanyl crisis that was coming into Connecticut, especially in Hartford. There was a lot of big federal cases at that point. Why do you think that guy chose to get out of prison and start selling drugs again?
You know, I remember asking him once, and he said something like, because he's very smart, he could be doing anything he wants to. He said it was what he knew. He was great at it. He kind of said, you know, I'm a black guy. I don't have a sick jump shot. You know, I don't know how to rap or sing. So this is what it is for me. And it didn't make sense because all of us were like, you could be doing anything you really want to do. You're so smart, but this is what you choose to do. So maybe the fast life, the money, the luxurious lifestyle, all of that played into it.
How long were you working with him for?
All in all, that time around, not even a full year.
And then what happens? You guys get caught?
Oof. Yeah, things started to hit the fan. Like I said, he was seeking out the strongest fentanyl from China and having it delivered to one of the women in our circle's house. And I had no idea. This was an animal tranquilizer. This was carfentanil. And just Googling it and looking it up, I'm like, why are you using this? Why are you mixing it in? And he would tell me, you know, this is going to get people hooked. This is going to keep them coming back. And I'm not using enough to the point where it'll kill them. I'm very careful. I'm very methodical. He would use these big words. And I'm like, okay, if you know what you're doing. At one point, I remember I was on methadone at the time also. So I was on methadone for about 10 years. And, you know, initially it was suggested, I think by probation, like this program is going to help you. This is good for you. In the beginning, they literally had my mom come in and sign a waiver saying acknowledging how dangerous methadone was and the bad side effects that it had. And now, after kicking it cold turkey, I know that it's almost worse for you than the drug itself. Some people, it might help. I personally have never known anybody that's been successful on it. For me, I know it didn't help me. It enabled me to keep using. It almost made it harder for me to quit my addiction.
And you were still using drugs while on the methadone?
I was still using drugs, yes, because the methadone was giving me that little bit of taste of the opiate. And as an addict, you just crave more of it. You're like, how can I get this faster? Well, then I needed both of those things to keep pushing. Anyway, I go to my methadone clinic one day to get dosed, and there's this very well-known Norwalk narcotics detective standing inside, and the manager of the program calls out my name, which, like, HIPAA, you don't do that, you know? You go to the window, you hand them your ID very discreetly, and nobody's supposed to know very much. And when he called out my name, like, there's nobody else in here. I'm like, yeah? So automatically I'm like, shit, what's going on? And he was like, oh, no, I just wanted to see how you're doing today. I was like, I'm good. You know, I go through the window, I get my dose, go back out to the car, and sure enough, this detective is following me, watching me, pulls out his phone, takes a picture of my car, and takes something down as I drive away. So I called my plug, my drug dealer, and I was like, this just happened. And it was like he already knew what was going on. he said, meet me at this hotel. So he would stay out of hotels, luxury hotels, for weeks at a time, and kind of camp out there, sell from the neighboring areas. And these are places like the Hyatt in Greenwich, the Sheraton in Stamford, very nice places. So he told me I had to pack my bags and go down to stay at the Sheraton Hotel in Stamford. And I was like, why? What about my job? What am I going to tell my family? He was like, I don't give a shit, make something up, figure it out. The cops are on us. So if you don't want to go to jail, you'll listen to me. And I'm like, okay, this is getting real. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what you did. And I jokingly was like, who died? And he was like, what did you say? And I was like, oh no. What? I just knew things were going to get bad. So I went home, did as I was told, packed my bag, and I told my mom I had like a live-in case, like nannying or something in New York. And my mom asked a few questions, but she was like, okay, just you'll have your phone on you, right? You'll come and visit, right? I'm like, yeah, everything's cool. I'm staying in Stamford, literally, 2 towns down, and just selling to customers out of there. So, or neighboring areas around there. It wasn't long before he leased an apartment through someone else's name on the border of New York, so in Portchester. And it was a brand new luxury apartment building. It was beautiful. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And he was like, you think so? You're staying here. And I was like, okay, all right. So I lived there. It felt good. I'm like, I've got this nice place. I know there's things going on. I know I'm going to be careful. But it almost felt like new territory. So the same people I had to look out for weren't going to be coming after me. That Norwalk narcotics detective wasn't going to be showing up here, right? No. That lasted for a little while. I want to say about 6 months. About 4 months in, maybe 5, he gets picked up. And he was at a hotel with his girlfriend in Elmsford, New York, I believe. And I was on the phone with him, and I heard, DEA, get down on the ground. And I'm like, oh no, what's happening? I was like, shit, this is it. We're done. So he was with his girlfriend, and I called his baby mama because, he had them both. I called his baby mama, and I was like, this is what I just heard on the phone. I didn't tell her about the other girl. That was always like, don't tell. Keep it to yourself. And she freaked out. She was pregnant. And, I told her, stay calm. Don't worry. We'll figure it out. He had a storage unit down the street full of drugs. So we knew that we could keep the business going. And she had done it before. So the time before he went to prison, she had kept the operation running. So she knew what to do. They knew that they could trust me, even though I was a drug addict. I was always correct with the money. I was always correct with the drugs, with my notes, which, hurt me in the long run because the feds picked that up. But I became really paranoid. Even before he got picked up, I was like, hey, there's a blacked out SUV outside. That's the cops. And he would tell me, you're paranoid. You're delusional. Don't pay any mind to that. They're not after me yet. They don't know I'm here. And sure enough, they were watching us. So about a month and a half or 2 after they picked him up, I was still staying in the apartment. I was selling to a smaller client base because we kind of try to weed out people who could be a risk factor, people who could tell, something that could lead to the police. Some people I was like, he's a cop. I know it. We can't serve to him. But yeah, I went to dinner at Bar Taco down the street with my then boyfriend, and I called my plug's baby mother, and I was like, there's cops here. And she was like, relax, calm down. My boyfriend's like, she's paranoid. Don't listen to her. And she was like, listen, I'm sending you money for dinner. You know, we already had money. We were making really good money. I was like, we're good. She was like, no, but relax. You know, have a couple drinks, have fun, enjoy yourself. We'll talk after. And I'm like, okay. But the whole time, like, my spidey senses are on high alert. I'm like, oh, God, this guy doesn't belong. He's just standing there. Like, I'm looking out for all these red flags. And sure enough, that was the day that the DEA ran up on us. We left dinner. We had a couple drinks, so we were a little tipsy, but we lived right up the street. From when I got settled into bed and everything, I turned on the TV. I was ready to like just call it a day. And one of our loyal customers called and was like, hey, I'm down the street. And I was like, oh shit, I forgot about him. So I sent my boyfriend. I was like, can you just go see him? And he was like, oh, I really don't want. I'm like, just, okay. So he goes and sees him. And maybe like 20 minutes later, my custody calls me and is like, they pulled over your boyfriend. I was like, what? Who? I was like, crap, his license is suspended. So I'm like, oh, let me get my stuff. I'm coming to save him, right? I don't know what I thought I was going to do. So something in me told me this could be a setup, but he would have told me. He would have told me these are the feds. These aren't normal cops. These, you know, they're in unmarked cars. This was a loyal customer, and he didn't say any of that. So instead of hiding anything, I just grab my stuff and I run out. Sure enough, I pull out of the garage, I turn a corner, and I'm surrounded by DEA agents, guns drawn. I mean, I'm freaking out even thinking about it. They all pull up, yelling at me, turn the car off, put your phone down, hands up in the air. And I'm like, like, what do I do first? Hold on. Like, I'm literally freaking out. And my custody is still on the phone. And he's like, oh my God, what's going on? I was like, I gotta call you back. So I listened to them. They pulled me out of the car super aggressively. They started raiding it. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? And they were like, you know, one of the guys showed me his badge and he was like, I think you know what's going on. You know, they said my co-defendant's name. Do you know who that guy is? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure enough, they played me a tape recording. They were like, really? One of the other guys comes over and he's on the tape recording being asked, do you know who Mary Valdovinos is? And he flat out says, yes, she's a subcontractor of mine. And they're like, what does that mean? She sells drugs for me. I'm like, oh my God. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, obviously they didn't buy any of my bullshit. They cuffed me. They had me stand there. They went through my car. And where I got stopped, right in front of my apartment building, was across the street from a church. And it was right on the green. So all these people, it was maybe like 10, 15 people came out. And I was like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. And one of the women walks up to me and she's like, we don't know what's going on, but we're praying for you. And I'm like, oh, thank you. You know, I was brought up Catholic. So obviously, I wasn't as faithful in my religion at the time, but I was like, God, please help me. I'm sorry. Like, you know, repenting to myself. It was just bad. They ended up calling the U.S. attorney, who said that what they found in my car, it was personal use. I had a couple bags. I was an IV user, so I had a couple needles, and I had like $3,000 in cash in the trunk, which to me at the time was like chump change, you know, in case of an emergency, in case I get a flat. But she was like, that's not enough to get her, you know, go in the apartment. And they wanted me to sign off on them going in. And I was like, I don't know what you're trying to do. I don't even live here. You know, I'm still trying to bullshit my way out of this. Well, they grabbed my keys. They pulled me cuffed, you know, with them. And they kind of like guided me to the place. They're like, which apartment is it? I was like, I don't know. So I'm still being stubborn, defiant the whole time. Well, they had my boyfriend pulled over down the street. And I was like, yeah, he has nothing to do with this. And they're like, oh, we know. I guess he might have told them what apartment it was. And they used the key. They let themselves in. And the raid was on. I sat there on the floor, cuffed for like 4 or 5 hours while the fire department just pounded away at the fireproof safe. And it was like just agony. They were like, you don't know the code to the safe? Of course you know the code. Yeah, I did. But I was like, no, this isn't my apartment. I have no idea. What are we going to find in here? Are there weapons? Are there drugs? Is there cash? And again, I'm like, I have no idea. I don't want to be involved. I knew I was going down. I just didn't know how bad it would be. So they collected, packaging materials and everything. They talked to the leasing department who showed them the lease. I wasn't on the lease. And by the end of the night, at this point, it was dark out. I had no idea what time it was. I felt like shit because I was a heroin addict. I hadn't used. I felt like I was withdrawing. And they served me with a subpoena. I'm like, you're not taking me? I was very confused by it. And they were like, the subpoena said that, I had a court date for me to be a witness against my plug and a couple other co-defendants that were listed. And they were like, be there. And that's what they left me with, just a destroyed apartment. They took everything that they found, and I didn't really know where to go from there.
So did you end up getting charged, or they just wanted you as a witness?
So they wanted me as a witness. I think that they knew I was the lowest person in our circle. I was nobody to them, and they told me. They were like, you can get off this if you just come in, tell us what we need to know, and we'll let you go. I'm like, okay, sure. So I had a witness attorney listed on the subpoena. I call him. We set up a date. I go in. I meet with this prosecutor and a couple of the DEA agents that were there, and I'm very respectful, very proper. I show up. They had me sign some paperwork, this is to state that because you're cooperating with us, no charges will be filed against you. I'm like, okay. So ask away. And I completely lied to them the entire time. I mean, I made up fictitious people. Now, this wasn't my imagination. This was something that we planned if the feds ran up on us and were to pick us up. So to them, I'm probably this sociopath, this pathological liar who's just pulling up names out of thin air. But this was a plan that we had put together if the feds were ever to pick us up. So at the end of that hour and a half, whatever it was, the U.S. attorney stands up and she rips the paperwork up right in front of me. And she was like, we're going to be arresting you. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, you completely sat here and lied to us. You are protecting monsters. Whatever you think you're doing, it's not okay. And what was I going to say? I really thought that they had nothing much against me. Yeah, they found the apartment, but I wasn't in it. Yeah, I'm not on the lease. They never actually saw me selling drugs or caught me with that. So I wasn't sure what the extent of what they thought my involvement was until they ended up arresting me. And, full disclosure, I knew what I was doing was wrong. I knew I was committing a crime, being a drug runner. At the time, I'm using drugs too. I was the only person that was part of our circle that was drug dependent. So the way I always thought about selling drugs was, I'm doing it. They're going to get it from somewhere anyway. I might as well help them with it. And that is such a twisted way to think. It wasn't until I got sober that I see it with clarity, but I was perpetuating the same harm that was killing me slowly. Anyway, about a week, maybe 10 days go by, and I was going down to the Bronx at the time to pick up my supply, mostly for personal use. I was still looking out for a couple of my friends. And that night, I was getting ready to get into bed, and the narcotics unit shows up at my parents' house to pick me up. And I was in nothing but a nightgown. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bond out. This is Norwalk Police Department. Nope. The next morning, I was transported to Bridgeport Federal Courthouse by the same 2 DEA agents that were in that room when I lied. And they just treated me like complete shit. I'm in full withdrawal now, on the way up, they're like taking pictures of me on their cell phones, and I'm miserable. I'm shaking. I'm throwing up. I'm cuffed. And they're doing like face swap with my picture, like making fun of me. And I'm just like, really? Like, they're just being assholes. But anyway, they were saying some stuff to me in the car. They were like, you have no idea how much shit you're in. You've got 2 dead bodies on you. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I literally said, what the hell are you talking about? And they were like, oh, come on, you can stop playing stupid now. And I'm like, who are you talking about? They were like, well, the first body we were investigating that we asked you about. And they had been asking about someone. But I was like, that had nothing to do with me. And the second person that they mentioned was one of the women that was in our circle. And I thought that they were bullshitting me. I didn't know that she was actually dead. So that was the first time I found that out. By the time I got to the Bridgeport Federal Courthouse I'm just going through the motions. It's like you might as well have been dragging around like a lifeless body because I had no idea what was to come. They assigned me a special public defender because my co-defendants had already had theirs. And he was a great guy, he was really trying to be helpful. But at this time, I still don't know who to trust. So I'm trying to stick to the story that I told them. We're all on the same plan, right, guys? In my head, no. And he told me, they're trying to hit you with manslaughter. And everything just came crashing down on me. I was like, this is unbelievable. So I went before the judge. I was arraigned. The prosecutor wouldn't even turn and look at me. I was like, please, I'll tell you anything you want to know. At this point, I'm worthless to them. The queen pin was in the same courthouse signing her plea deal. So, and she to them was the best thing since sliced bread, as my lawyer put it. And she was privy to everything. She knew, everything about the black market orders, about the deliveries, about the content. There were things listed on my indictment that I had never even heard of. One of them was U4770. I could be wrong. It's an animal tranquilizer. And it was one of the substances that was found in the safe. So here I am thinking I can post bond. I'm like, my family's in the courtroom. My then boyfriend's in the courtroom. His dad's there. And the prosecutor turns and looks at them and says, just for context for the family, when they're reading off the charges, she says there's 2 dead people. So she will definitely be facing at least 30 years. And my mom's face just went like white. It just like... And I'm like, why would she say that? Like, that has nothing to do with me, But of course, they don't believe a word I say. They gave me no bond because I was a menace. I was a manipulative liar. I was protecting monsters. And I was a flight risk to them. So they sent me to York Correctional for holding at the time. And there I sat with all of this crap and detoxing from the drugs, from the methadone, just ruminating, going crazy. Like, what is going to happen to me? Where does my fate lie now?
What were the final charges they indicted you on?
Conspiracy with intent to distribute multiple narcotics, heroin, carfentanil, U4770, aiding and abetting. Yeah, I believe that's it. They were really trying to come after us for the manslaughter charges. And so one of the people had been, one of our customers. I don't know to this day who did it. I do believe that it wasn't entirely fair that nobody got charged with it. I mean, by the grace of God, I didn't get charged with it because, and I turned to God so much at this time because I was like, God, like I had nothing to do with this. I didn't commit this crime and I'm facing 30 years for something I didn't do. And the other person, the woman who was actually, kind of a friend of mine, I consider them all my friends. We were in the same circle. She definitely committed suicide. I mean, when I got my evidence package, it showed images of her, like with her computer screen pulled up to the story of our drug dealer being arrested. And she was ruminating in her head and she was anxious and we were trying to calm each other down at the time in case either one of us was arrested. And I just kept telling her, like, don't worry, like, we'll be okay. We're in this together. But I think the agony of it all just got to her and she ended up snorting straight carfentanil, and she was a pill popper. So that, to me, that's a suicide, I wasn't even touching the fentanyl, let alone carfentanil is the strongest form of fentanyl that there is. So that hit me really hard,
How long did you sit in holding for?
3 months. 3 months. My attorney filed a motion to get me into rehab. So this was my first rehab ever. And yeah, I didn't know what to expect. They first sent me to a transitional house in New Haven. I was on full lockdown, no movement. My family was able to visit once or twice, but I was still just going crazy. I lost so much weight. I felt like crap. Mostly because I didn't know what was going to happen with my case. I'm still, going to court for it. Going to rehab, though, was a unique experience. I definitely appreciated it. This was a time where I felt very grateful for any opportunity other than being incarcerated. And I was hopeful that fighting it from the outside would give me, an upper hand and the opportunity to prove myself in many ways. Slowly but surely, my lawyer was incredible, and he was able to gather some evidence. I would tell him, like, this day I was here, I don't know whose cell phone that was, but look at the camera footage. And they would get the camera footage, and they were able to prove that I wasn't in certain places that tied me to the crimes they were trying to charge me with. So ultimately, they didn't charge anyone in my conspiracy with the manslaughter charges. A blessing and a curse. I didn't realize the gravity of things until I'm learning about these substances and I'm talking to people, which I shouldn't have been talking to anyone about my case in rehab because people were really making me feel like crap about it. Some people were like calling me a murderer, you're the very person that we're trying to protect ourselves against. And all the while, I'm struggling with my addiction. So I did that time. I would say, all in all, about a year I was away from home. And they wanted to remand me back into custody, but my lawyer appealed that, and he was able to get me to go back home. My sentencing was only a few months away, and I almost wish I had gone back to prison because as soon as I came home, I received too warm a welcome from, former drug dealers that were like, good for you, but you should have snitched on him because he snitches on other people, on my plug. And Yeah, everyone pointed the circle at each other. At the end of the day, it was like me, the lowest on the bar, next to my plug, and all the in-betweeners just fell off. You know, they cooperated, they got their plea deals, they were done. Most of them never even stepped foot in prison for a day. But I did what I did, and I don't regret it. But yeah, so one of my drug dealers tells me, "Oh, I heard your co-defendant just got 15 years." And that just like shattered me. I felt like I was home. You know, this is a fresh start. Things are looking up. There was a new prosecutor on my case who was a lot more lenient, understanding of what I was going through. So my first instinct was to use again. That is how I coped with the anxiety. And it wasn't heroin anymore. It was all fentanyl by the time I came home. And that's all anyone had. So I had a couple of overdoses. One was pretty bad. And by this time, people were carrying Narcan. So by the grace of God, I was saved, and I'm alive today. But one of those first times that I used again, I was with a couple of friends. I was like, I'm only going to do a little bit. You know, I just started using again, and I don't remember a thing. All I remember is rising from the ground, gasping for air, like literally like you're reviving a dead body. And I took one big gasp, and I'm like, from the ground, sat straight up, and everyone's freaking out in front of me, like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Da, da, da. And I'm like in my head, like, shut the hell up. You know, it feels like I just got hit by a truck. And after that, I didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep using. I felt a sense of relief in that moment that even though I knew I was that close to death, I was none the wiser. There was no white light. There was no, reflection on my life. It was just, and I thought to myself, if I was to die, this is the way to go. It was like, that's bad. I was in this mental state of depression and anxiety and just regret. I felt so much shame for what I was going through, for what I had put my family through, for the way I tarnished my name, their name, and hurt other people, that I was basically living to die.
What was the final outcome of your case?
I was sentenced to 1.5 years, time served, and 3 years of probation. The judge and the prosecutor were really, they were like, "You're the only drug runner that was drug dependent and the only one who stepped foot in jail but has taken strides to get better," because they think I came home and I stayed clean, and I'm still trying to beat the system, giving them clean urines. But I wasn't. So they were really nice to me. The judge said, "I don't believe that you belong in prison. I see a great deal of potential in you, and I want to give you the opportunity to continue on this path." And I cried. I was so grateful. I thought, 3 years of probation, this is going to be great. And it wasn't. It wasn't. Federal probation was really tough.
Way worse than the state.
Way worse. And they were on to me. And they caught me with the fake urines. They were in communication with my methadone clinic because I got back on methadone. And they were like, "This isn't adding up." They started sending me to programs. They started showing up at my job. "You can't work under the table. You have to get a job on the books." So I didn't quit my under the table job. I got a part-time on the books. Well, part-time isn't enough, so you should go back to school. So I go back to community college, and I'm actually focusing in. I'm getting straight A's. Well, you got a dirty urine, though, so you got to do 60 hours of community service and a day in lockup. Oh, my God. I was like, this is insane. Plus, they had me writing these journals every day for support court, which was, you go into a courtroom once a week, and you're basically judged by a judge, probation officers, a community liaison, and I just remember I would sit there and cry every week because they would make me feel like crap about myself, that I couldn't get clean, I couldn't stay clean. And mind you, I did want to. I just didn't know how. I felt like it seems so easy, but tell it to my body that feels like crap if I don't have the drug. Tell it to my brain that wants to die if I don't have the drug. Tell it to all my emotions that are heightened when I don't have the drug. So it was definitely a challenge for me. And I remember at one point I said, please just send me to prison. Like, I can't do this anymore. I was beyond stressed out, super overwhelmed. It was no way to live. I was living to die, and I did not care. I actually hoped that one of those shots would just take me out. And the reason I was a little careful was because of my family. I had caused them so much pain already. I didn't know if my existence would hurt them more or if it would hurt them less if I was gone. I ended up violating my probation. There were a couple times I should have violated in between, though. One of them, I went to New York on Thanksgiving with my current boyfriend, and I was like, it's the Thanksgiving Day parade. Let's go down, whatever. We'll be in and out. We'll take the train in. So the toll reader doesn't read my license plate. My probation officer won't know. And we had a good time that day. We're riding the city bikes to like Rockefeller Center to go ice skating. And I slipped out on some sand. I landed on the edge of a sidewalk with the bike on top of me. And those bikes are kind of heavy. They've got the trackers in them and everything. And my boyfriend turns around and he's like, don't look down. And my leg was just completely broken. My foot was hanging off of my ankle. It was like a zigzag. It was crazy. And I didn't cry. I just yelled. I was like, And it was for so many reasons. I mean, yeah, it hurt like hell, but also I'm on federal probation. I'm not supposed to be down here. And everyone's like, we're going to call 911. And I'm like, no, someone's on the way. And I told him, like, you got to get these bikes back, and we have to call an Uber. My phone is dead, so go fast. So he goes, returns the bikes, comes back. We get an Uber back to the hotel to get our stuff, up to Greenwich Hospital. And I'm like, oh, my God, we're in the free and clear. The whole time, my foot is hanging off my leg. It was crazy. And sure enough, the next day, my PO, I told her I was in the hospital. She comes to my house, and she's like, let me see the paperwork. What were you doing in Greenwich? And I was absolutely going to get violated if she knew I was in New York. I just made up, I was at my cousin's house. And my parents kind of enabled me, they went along with it. And, yeah, she made me go to a program. After that, it wasn't long. I couldn't stop using. I was really bad off, and I really didn't care either. They violated my probation. The judge had been super lenient, and he seemed really disappointed in me. He just couldn't wrap his head around it. I mean, the look of disappointment on his face when I went before him in sweats, because I knew I was going to prison. I didn't know where I would be going or for how long. I owed about like 10 months, and I think that's basically what they gave me. And the prosecutor said in the courtroom, Your Honor, this girl is hopeless. She will never overcome her addiction, and we have exhausted all of our resources trying to help her. And I was, I felt like crap hearing that I was hopeless and that I would never change. And the judge, they wanted to give me way more time, plus probation on top of it. The judge said, clearly that didn't work for her the first time, so I'm going to give her what she owes, and good luck to you. And that was it. I was off to Wyatt, and that is where I kicked my 12-year opiate addiction and 10-year methadone addiction cold turkey.
Oh, you did the full 10 months at Wyatt?
No.
Oh, okay.
I wish. They, 2 months after, sent me to Cimarron in Oklahoma, It's like a facility that they contract with now. And then about a month and a half later, I was transferred to FDC Philadelphia.
So you never made it to a camp or anything?
No,
They
I
just
wish.
had you in detention centers.
Oh, yeah.
Why wouldn't they just send you to Brooklyn or something? They sent you all the way to Oklahoma and then all the way back to Brooklyn?
For 10 months.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Way to waste government resources now.
Yeah, when they, I mean, we've talked about Con Air and everything on the show all the time.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy what they do, like shipping people across. And I mean, to get from Danbury to New Jersey, it's like a 1 month trip.
Yeah. It's insane. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, the first flight from New York, because, you know, you depart from that military base to
Stewart
Oklahoma.
Air Force Base, I think.
Yeah, Air Force Base. That took an entire day from like 4 a.m. until we landed in Oklahoma at 1 a.m. And by the time we got processed, I don't know what time it was because they stopped in Illinois first, I believe. But just getting on and off that flight. And I got black boxed. Do you know? Okay.
Why'd they black box
Oh
you?
my God. They got the wrong short girl. Leaving from Oklahoma to Philadelphia, there was another girl who ended up being my bunkie in the shoe. Oh my God, that was a terrible experience. She was trying to talk to the guys through the gate, and I'm over here, I'm minding my business. Like, I'm still detoxing from this over decade-long addiction. I feel like crap. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going now. You know, let me be miserable in peace. And one of the guards tells her to cut it off, right? So she stops, and then she starts again. And the guard goes, black box the short girl. And a guard comes over to me, and I'm like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And he's like, he just told me to black box you. I'm like, her, she's short too. And he's like, whatever. So he black boxed me. And everyone was cracking up. I was like, oh my God. So I'm black boxed this whole time on the way to Philadelphia. And they put that like in your record, I guess.
Yeah, like once you get black boxed once or something like that.
Yeah.
So every time you have to travel, you're black boxed.
That's it. Hopefully never again, because it's never comfortable either way, but everyone's like, what did you do? You know, all the marshals on the plane, and I'm like, nothing.
So you spent a lot of your prison sentence in just a cell, basically, and when you're in detention centers, a lot of that is cell time.
Yeah. Yep.
Tell us about that. What was that like?
So my first, Wyatt, I'll tell you, the women there were incredibly welcoming and supportive, and I made some great connections. There was this one girl, she'll probably watch the podcast, Tiffany. She looked out for me hard. I mean, a lot of the girls in there were behind their addiction, and so, you know, when you go into prison and you're an addict, people kind of treat you like crap because they're like, oh, here comes another junkie detoxing. And when you think about it, the system isn't made for that. You know, people need help. People need resources. They need real treatment and access to mental health resources when they're in there. You don't have that. So you go into prison not knowing what to expect, afraid, like, are people going to come at me? Are they going to try to hurt me? All of the above, and then you feel like crap also coming off of these drugs, unsupervised. Like, I had a seizure. I remember going down to medical and literally faking feeling better because I had teeth fall out of my mouth. I mean, that methadone detox was no joke, and it was miserable. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was restless. It was awful, but I knew that I would survive. And what was different this time going in was like me literally changing my mentality. Before I would go in and honestly, like I said, I was living to die. I know how awful it sounds, but I would pray like, God, please just take me. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live anymore. And this time I went in praying like, God, please just get me through to tomorrow. Please just get me to the next day. Please just get me to the end of this. And opening that Bible and really like applying it to my life and believing in myself for once, because people were telling me, you've got to do this for you, not for anyone else. But I didn't care about myself. I cared about others, and I always have. regardless of what I've been doing, what I did wrong, crimes I committed. So I initially did it to not hurt my family. And as I prayed and as I grew stronger, I started doing it for me. And I started to actually see some value in myself and treat myself like a worthy person. So, yeah, having this support of women in there, it really helped too. Because unlike other places where people would talk crap to you, you're a junkie, shut the hell up, you're disturbing my sleep, and I'd be like, sorry, as I'm throwing up, it was different this time. And like this girl Tiffany got me moving, like, let's go to the gym, let's walk around, let's play volleyball. And at first I was so annoyed. I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. I hate that I'm doing this right now. But it was the intention, right? And I had a feeling I was going to be transferred to Danbury because I requested it in court. I said, Your Honor, if you could I would like to stay close to my family. If you could send me to Danbury. He was like, I don't see why not. I'll put it in, but it's ultimately up to the BOP. And I did not go to Danbury. I drove in the van to Danbury to drop off some girls. Then we drove to the airport. So once I got to Oklahoma, it was okay. I started to, as I sobered up, I started to feel better, connect with people. There's always some women that try to come at you, but you've got to have your own back. And I think that once I started building up my confidence more, I had that little edge to be able to fight back a little, So Oklahoma wasn't too bad. I was still restless. The food sucked. The water was disgusting. I mean, they would tell me, drink water, drink water. I'm like, the water is brown and it smells. Like, I'm not drinking that. And it was bologna almost every day. It was awful.
Yeah, when you're in transit, all they're giving you is those bologna sandwiches for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. But I met some interesting characters out there. Saw some crazy fights. I actually became friends with the people that people would tell me, like, stay away from them. She's got bad mental health. But something would always draw me in. So, like in Philadelphia, I spent my first 3 weeks in the SHU. And this was during COVID, and they told us, you can't drop to Gen Pop unless you get the COVID shot. And I'm like, I don't want to get that. I heard bad things about it. There's no research done on it. Meanwhile, I was just shooting dope every day, right? Anyway, I was like, whatever, I got to get out of here. I had a terrible time with my bunkie. She ended up, she was trying to, like, intimidate me, and she grabbed my hair and, like, twirled it around her finger. And I was like, I need to hit her now. And I hit her, but we were in SEG. We were in the SHU. So she was, like, just as shocked as I was. And I go back to my bunk, and I sit on it, and I pretend like I'm reading the only book in our cell. And she goes and slams on the door, and she starts screaming, let me out of here, get me out of here. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on with this girl. And the guards came up, and they were like, everything okay? And she goes, no, it's not okay. You got to get me or her out of here. They were like, yeah, tough luck, kid. And it was all male guards. So at FDC Philadelphia, we didn't even have full outfits. We were wearing just dirty T-shirts and underwear, because the jumpsuits that they gave us were completely tattered. They were torn. You couldn't wear them. And mind you, it's all male guards. So you're trying to, like, find a way to cover yourself up. And you can't. You can't. The shower would work sometimes. It's 24-hour lockdown in there. And for 3 weeks. Plus, you can only make a phone call in there every 15 days. And it's not on the 15th day. It's after the 15th day. So when we dropped to Gen Pop, I mean, the other girls in the SHU had heard what was going on. So, they kind of like, we were cool with each other. They were like, okay, like, you're good.
I was actually in the SHU in Philly, too.
Yeah? How long were you there?
Like 6 weeks during the hurricane in Puerto Rico. I got stuck there, and I was in the SHU, so it was terrible. But there's a
Jesus.
shower in those shoes.
Yes.
But they don't give you any, like, it's either the jumpsuit or you're literally, there's no shorts or anything. You're either
Nothing.
in the jumpsuit or you're in boxers and a t-shirt.
Yep.
It's so weird.
And we didn't even have, I would have been happy with boxers. We just had the briefs, and I was like, oh my God. And our shower didn't always work. So sometimes we could shower, sometimes we wouldn't.
And there's no, like, hot and cold water. It's just
No.
a button.
Exactly.
Terrible.
Exactly. And I'm like, I just punched this girl in the face. She could kill me in the shower, you know?
Tell us about one of those crazy fights that you witnessed.
Oh my gosh. Ugh. So in Philly, just the girls would go at it. I mean, grabbing each other's heads and slamming it against the cement walls or the floor. Oh my gosh. And we had the mouse traps. I will never forget this. We had the sticky mouse traps. So the girls used to sit and like watch the mice die slowly, which was weird as hell. One of the girls grabbed a mouse trap with a dying mouse on it and put it on another girl's face. Oh my God. It's like you wanted to watch, but I couldn't. I was like cringing.
What would they fight over?
A lot of girls in there did like K2 or Suboxone. So they would fight over money, commissary, the K2, like, oh, you still owe me for this. There was one girl that was constantly getting beat up and sent to the SHU. But, you know, at FDC Philadelphia, you were required to work or do something, or you would get sent to the SHU for that too. So some girls just took up permanent residence in the SHU.
Do you feel like the 10 months went by quick or slow? And you weren't getting any good time or anything, right? You had to do every day of those 10 months?
Yeah, I did.
I guess the good aspect is you were done after that.
Yeah. In the beginning, it went by agonizingly slow, like painfully slow. But I also wasn't sleeping, so I was kicking my addiction fully, and I felt like complete crap. Once I got out of Oklahoma, I started sleeping a little bit better. They were also like trying to give me meds and playing around with that, so that was causing me an intense like head pain, a lot of side effects from that. I was just getting sick, and I was like, you know what? I don't want any medication because whatever you guys are giving me, I don't know what it is. I can't Google it, and it's making me feel worse. So, and just the way they treated mental health in general. I mentioned earlier, you know, some girls would be like, stay away from her. I made a really close friendship with this girl, Ashley, in Philadelphia. I don't know where she is right now, but she suffered from schizophrenia, and a lot of the women there would either dismiss her or ignore her, but there were few that would actually try to protect her and take care of her. And she had such a good heart. She was just such a sweet girl that, due to growing up in a bad environment, you know, her mom was on drugs. She had sold her when she was young, and she was very drug addicted herself. She succumbed to those circumstances, and she was in the system for a long time. And she had been to mental hospitals, she told me. She had been to different county jails, federal prison. And that's because she was from Philly, and she acted out at Liberty Park against a one of those park officers, park rangers. So she tried to fight a park ranger and ended up in the feds. But she was always crying out for help. She would sometimes like strip naked and go to the top tier and threaten to jump off the rafter, and you know, we would try to calm her down and get her to relax, and they would lock her in her cell. She'd take a razor and start like cutting herself. And, you know, we would tell the COs, like, you got to go look out for Ashley. I remember one CO, as she was cutting herself, maced her in her cell. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? She's got open wounds. Like, she's going to get infected. You got to get her out of there. She can't breathe. You know, she's not a harm to anyone else but herself. And yeah, she would talk crap to some of the other women. You know, she would go at them, but we all knew that was Ashley being Ashley. It was such a disservice to her. It was really sad to see. And, you know, I had a real soft spot in my heart for her, and I still do to this day. But there's so much that needs to be done for not just the women in there, for people in general. I mean, there are no services. Like, I told you, I broke a tooth when I fell and had a seizure. So that tooth was like sharp. I broke another one in Oklahoma. That's the one that was sharp in Philly. And I'm like, this is literally like my cheek is bleeding on the inside every day. Like, they have medical resources, but they don't want to take you. They don't want to help you. They don't want to take care of you. You're lucky if you get ibuprofen. That's not on commissary, right? So
Yeah, you go to medical, they say order it on commissary.
exactly.
And those aren't even that strong.
Exactly. And my money was still like in Wyatt. By the time it caught up to me in Philly, I was like, you know what? Whatever.
What do you think is more effective, rehab or prison for beating a drug addiction?
Honestly, for me, it was prison. And that's just because I was stripped away of everything I had access to. I mean, God knew that my addiction was that bad, that that's what I needed. And it was just the right amount of time for me to kick it and change my mentality. I mean, I could have come home and started using again, but after everything I went through, I felt like I was finally looking at life differently. I finally saw a future for myself. I started feeling good about myself in prison. When you don't have all of the appearance, all the fancy clothes, designer stuff, and titles in front of your name, you're just like everyone else, right? Regardless of your crime, you're in the same place. We all ended up here for a reason. And I started tutoring women, like a lot of the ICE women that didn't speak English, that had homework to do for like getting their kids back or GED. I started helping them with translating. I worked, so I had 2 jobs in there. I was cleaning the showers, and I was handing out the trays in the morning. So I was the first one out and the last one in. And I just said this quote to one of my colleagues yesterday. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. And when I was cleaning those showers, I was so intentional because, I came down from the shoe. They asked me if I wanted to do it. And I'm like, sure. And automatically, like, women were like, you better clean the crap out of those showers. You better clean the showers. And some women would mess with me. They would leave disgusting things in the showers. Not to mention, it was a high rise. So when the girls would be fishing in the toilet, we would get that septic overflow. So I'd be there plunging crap out of the showers. But I was fully intentional. Like, these are going to be the cleanest showers you guys have, and you're going to miss me when I'm gone. And they sure did. Before I left, I remember, like, the same woman that was giving me crap in the beginning was like, Mary, you better train that girl right to clean the showers. They're not sparkling. So, it gave me more purpose, and it made me look forward to what I would do when I came home.
How have you been able to rebuild your life after prison?
Wow. In many ways, and I still have a lot to go. I hit the ground running. I reconnected with a nonprofit that I was volunteering and working with before I was violated. And this nonprofit organization was all about women against mass incarceration. It was about empowering women who have been through the system, teaching them how to rebuild their lives and move forward. So once I started working there, I was basically helping them build out programs, operate the nonprofit essentially by myself sometimes. And it gave me more purpose. I was working with women in the halfway houses, women who were writing me from prison, guiding them on what they should do, and connecting them to resources and services, all of the things that I wasn't privy to when I was going through it. So at some point, even when I was in prison, those words that the prosecutor said sat with me, that they had exhausted all of their resources trying to help me. Now, working in this field, knowing how many resources there are, like, you really didn't do anything for me, and it's not on them. I take full responsibility for everything I went through, all the harm I perpetuated in my community. But I also know how many people feel worthless and are told that they're hopeless and will never change and believe that. So when you get into that way of thinking, you're going down that spiral. Instead of lifting yourself up, it's like the way you talk to yourself and the things you tell yourself matter. And the people you surround yourself with matter too. So if you just have one person like me or you, Ian, telling people you can pull through this, you can turn your life around, look at us. We're inspiring, we're motivating people just by being ourselves, right?
Have you been able to make amends with your parents?
Yeah. As much as I can, right? I think a part of them will never forget, obviously, what I went through and forgive me for certain things. But I stopped trying to prove to everyone that I was worthy. And I just started living my life and proving to myself that I'm worthy. And slowly but surely that trust has rebuilt. My sister is now my best friend. So.
What's one piece of advice you wish you could give your teenage self?
I was such a broken girl. I felt like I had everything around me, but nothing inside me, in a way. I would tell her that she's worthy and that she should persevere and find her way and love herself above everyone else.
Mary, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Ian.
You did so good, and to think you thought you were going to be nervous and clam up.
I still think I kind of
No, you did great. You're a natural.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Sorry if I talked forever.
Oh, you did really good.
Thank you.